History often hides its deepest wounds in forgotten reels of film. The 1960s gave Britain war dramas that wrestled with honor, futility, and sacrifice, yet many slipped into obscurity. What if the stories we ignored then are the ones we most need now? Let's unearth 12 overlooked British war dramas finally earning the recognition they always deserved. The Long and the Short and the Tall, 1961. When this war drama first reached theaters, audiences weren't sure what to make of it. Adapted from Willis Hall's acclaimed stage play, The Long and the Short and the Tall, followed a group of British soldiers stranded in the Malayan jungle during World War II. Unlike the patriotic epics dominating cinemas, this film stripped war bare, showing confusion, fear, and moral paralysis. Directed by Leslie Norman and starring Lawrence Harvey, Richard Harris, and Richard Todd, the film crackled with tension. The soldiers' interactions with a captured Japanese soldier forced audiences to confront questions of morality. Who is truly civilized when the jungle reduces everyone to survival? Yet critics found the film unsettling. Some accused it of being too bleak, too talkative, too unheroic. Its refusal to glorify combat doomed its commercial success. Behind the scenes, producers worried the story would alienate mainstream viewers hungry for heroism rather than doubt. Indeed, box office numbers confirmed their fears. But the cast's intensity, Harris's raw energy, and Harvey's brooding presence carried echoes of stage realism into cinema. Today, the film is praised as one of the first British war dramas to dismantle the myth of noble sacrifice. It spoke a truth audiences weren't ready to hear, that war often reduces men to their most desperate selves. Its resonance now lies in its courage to show fragility, not glory. The Password is Courage, 1962. At first glance, this film seemed like another POW escape adventure, but The Password is Courage, starring Dirk Bogarde, dug deeper into the psyche of captured soldiers. Based on the real-life exploits of Sergeant Major Charles Coward, it told the improbable tale of a British prisoner who outwitted his Nazi captors again and again. When it premiered, audiences expected daring escapes and rousing action, and they got them. Yet what critics missed was the film's sly humor. Bogarde played Coward not as a stone-faced hero, but as a trickster, humiliating his captors with wit as much as cunning. This tone confused reviewers who didn't know whether to classify the movie as serious drama or dark comedy. Consequently, it slipped into the shadows of bigger war films like The Great Escape. Behind the scenes, Bogarde himself reportedly clashed with producers, fearing the film's balance of comedy and tragedy would be misunderstood. His instincts were right. The film was dismissed as tonally uneven. Yet decades later, historians see it differently. Coward's story reflects resilience not just in escape, but in spirit. War doesn't always breed grand heroics. It can also birth sly defiance and laughter in the face of brutality. Today, The Password is Courage stands as a quiet testament to the power of wit as a weapon. The Hill, 1965. When Sidney Lumet turned his lens toward a British military prison in North Africa, audiences braced for something different. And The Hill delivered. Starring Sean Connery in one of his finest non-Bond performances, the film exposed the brutal punishment inflicted on soldiers by their own army. Released in 1965, the film shocked viewers. Its enemy wasn't Nazis or Japanese soldiers, it was the British military system itself. Connery played Joe Roberts, a former officer imprisoned for striking his superior. Under the sadistic Sergeant Major Wilson, prisoners were forced to repeatedly climb a man-made sandhill under scorching desert sun, an allegory for futility and cruelty. Critics admired Lumet's sharp direction but worried the film was too intense, too merciless. Some audiences even walked out, unsettled by its relentless cruelty. Commercially, it never reached the heights of Connery's Bond films, but Connery himself later called it one of his proudest roles, a defiant stand against being typecast. Behind the camera, tensions were high. Lumet insisted on shooting in blistering heat to capture the actor's exhaustion. What you see on screen, sweat-drenched faces, raw throats, collapsing bodies, isn't performance. It's reality. Today, The Hill is celebrated as a masterpiece of anti-authoritarian cinema. It warned that cruelty doesn't just come from the enemy, it can fester within one's own ranks. Its message, ignored then, now echoes loudly. Sometimes the hardest battles are against those wearing the same uniform. King and Country, 1964. When Joseph Losey's King and Country premiered in 1964, it didn't arrive with the fanfare of blockbuster war dramas. Instead, it came with a whisper, an intimate, unsettling whisper about justice, futility, and betrayal. Adapted from the play Hamp by John Wilson, the film told the harrowing story of Private Arthur Hamp, a soldier court-martialed for desertion during World War I. Tom Courtenay delivered a heartbreakingly vulnerable performance as Hamp, a working-class soldier broken by the endless grind of the trenches. Dirk Bogarde played Captain Hargreaves, the officer reluctantly tasked with defending Hamp in a military tribunal. The film unspooled not on the battlefield, but in the claustrophobic confines of a muddy dugout, where morality clashed with bureaucracy. At the time, British audiences found the film uncomfortable, even unpatriotic. It dared to suggest that some men weren't cowards but victims, shattered minds crushed under the relentless pressure of war. Critics acknowledged its artistry but warned that it was too bleak, too theatrical, and unlikely to attract wide audiences. Commercially, it was a failure. Behind the scenes, Losey, a blacklisted American director living in Britain, saw the project as a chance to challenge official war narratives. His uncompromising vision clashed with producers who wanted something more palatable. But Losey refused to dilute the play's anti-war message, and his stubbornness became the film's defining strength. Today, King and Country is viewed as a daring piece of anti-war cinema that anticipated later explorations of shell shock and PTSD. It reminded audiences that war's cruelest weapon wasn't always a bullet. It was the machinery of justice that condemned broken men to die for cowardice. In Hamp's fate, we see the true tragedy, a system unable to recognize humanity in those it sent to die. Play Dirty, 1969. Released at the tail end of the decade, Play Dirty wasn't the triumphant World War II spectacle audiences expected. Instead, director André de Toth gave them something far more cynical. A war film drenched in betrayal, moral compromise, and sand. Starring Michael Caine as Captain Douglas, a reluctant officer forced to join a rogue demolition unit in North Africa, the film charted a mission doomed from the start. Alongside Nigel Davenport's ruthless Major Leach, Douglas discovers that loyalty and survival often collide. Nothing about Play Dirty felt heroic. Its desert cinematography was bleak, its characters driven more by greed and desperation than patriotism. Audiences at the time weren't ready. Released during an era still clinging to the myth of the noble Allied victory, the film was criticized for being too grim and too anti-heroic. It was overshadowed by more glamorous productions like Where Eagles Dare and The Battle of Britain. Critics dismissed it as cynical exploitation, and box office numbers reflected that dismissal. But history has been kinder. Detoth's film anticipated the gritty realism of later war movies like A Bridge Too Far and even influenced modern desert-set war thrillers. Its unapologetic refusal to celebrate war resonates with contemporary viewers weary of polished heroics. Behind the scenes, Michael Caine reportedly struggled with the grueling shoot in Spain's deserts, and tensions flared as Detoth demanded harsh conditions to maintain authenticity. What we see on screen, the sweat, exhaustion, and bitterness, wasn't faked. It was lived. Today, Play Dirty has been reappraised as a bold, unsentimental war drama. It dared to whisper the truth many didn't want to hear. In war, ideals crumble faster than men, and survival often means staining your soul. The Victors, 1963. Carl Foreman's The Victors arrived with ambition, scope, and a cast packed with stars, including George Peppard, Albert Finney, and Peter Fonda. Yet, despite its pedigree, the film quickly slipped into semi-obscurity. Why? Because it was too unflinching, too unwilling to comfort its audience. Spanning World War II from multiple perspectives, The Victors offered a mosaic of lives touched by conflict, not just soldiers, but civilians, lovers, and the forgotten. Foreman, who had been blacklisted in Hollywood, poured his cynicism into the script. Instead of triumphant victories, we saw moral compromises, executions, and hollow celebrations. The film's episodic structure alienated critics who called it unfocused and overly long. But what unnerved many was its refusal to glorify the Allied cause. One infamous sequence depicted the execution of a young American deserter on Christmas Eve, juxtaposed with carols and festive cheer. Audiences recoiled at the bleakness. Some cinemas even trimmed the scene to soften the blow. Behind the scenes, Foreman clashed with Columbia Pictures executives who wanted something closer to the guns of Navarone. Instead, he delivered a dark meditation on war's futility. The studio buried its promotion, and the film disappeared quietly, despite critical admiration in France and Italy. Today, The Victors feels prophetic, an early precursor to the morally ambiguous war films of the 70s. It captured not just the cost of war in blood, but in spirit. Forgotten for decades, it now reemerges as a film that dared to ask, can anyone truly win in war? Or are we all left scarred? Bitter Victory, 1960. When Nicholas Ray's Bitter Victory arrived in Britain, critics didn't know whether to label it a war film, a psychological drama, or an existential parable. Set in the North African desert during World War II, the film followed two British officers, played by Richard Burton and Kurt Jurgens, whose personal animosity boiled over during a dangerous mission behind enemy lines. At first glance, it had all the makings of a standard war adventure. A raid on German headquarters, the desert sun blazing, and the tense dynamic of men under fire. But Ray wasn't interested in conventional heroics. Instead, he exposed the fragility of masculinity, the corrosive effects of jealousy, and the absurdity of war's supposed glory. Burton's Captain Lythe and Jurgens' Major Brand weren't noble warriors. They were rivals consumed by pride and cowardice, their feud overshadowing their mission. Audiences in 1960 were unprepared. Many dismissed the film as talky and overwrought, while others recoiled from its anti-heroic stance. It failed commercially, eclipsed by more straightforward adventure films. Even Burton's star power couldn't save it from fading into obscurity. Behind the scenes, Nicholas Ray was battling his own demons. Rumors of clashes with producers and erratic behavior plagued the shoot. Yet what emerged on screen was uniquely raw. The desert setting became a stage for moral collapse, and Burton delivered one of his most complex performances, seething with inner conflict. Today, critics hail Bitter Victory as one of the earliest war films to strip away illusions of nobility. It doesn't glorify sacrifice. It reveals war as an arena where personal weakness is magnified. Forgotten for decades, it now resonates with viewers who recognize its daring. A war film less about victory and more about the emptiness of triumph itself. Tunes of Glory, 1960. When Tunes of Glory debuted, it wasn't immediately embraced as a war drama. It lacked battlefields, tanks, or enemy fire. Instead, it focused on a Scottish Highland regiment in the uneasy peace following World War II. But its battlefield was no less brutal, the clash between tradition, pride, and authority. Starring Alec Guinness and John Mills, the film explored the bitter rivalry between two commanding officers. Guinness's Jock Sinclair, a working-class soldier who rose through the ranks, resented the arrival of Mills' Colonel Barrow, an aristocratic officer steeped in tradition. Their struggle wasn't fought with rifles, but with pride, humiliation, and simmering resentment. At the time, audiences were surprised by its intensity. Critics praised the performances. Guinness was especially lauded for stepping away from his comic persona, but some struggled to categorize it. Was it a war film? A character drama? Its lack of combat scenes left it sidelined in discussions of Great British War cinema. Behind the scenes, the film's emotional weight was no accident. Director Ronald Neame worked closely with Guinness and Mills to craft layered performances that revealed the cost of war on men even after peace. Guinness, in particular, insisted on playing Sinclair not as a caricature, but as a tragic figure, someone who had lived too long in the shadow of wartime glory. Though overlooked for years, Tunes of Glory has since been reappraised as one of the most powerful studies of post-war trauma and class tension in the British Army. It reminds us that war doesn't always end on the battlefield. The scars linger, festering in pride and silence. The Bedford Incident, 1965. Though technically a British-American co-production, The Bedford Incident carried the cool precision of British filmmaking even as it plunged into Cold War paranoia. Starring Richard Widmark, Sidney Poitier, and Donald Sutherland, the film depicted a U.S. Navy destroyer stalking a Soviet submarine in Arctic waters. Its restrained storytelling and icy setting made it one of the most haunting military thrillers of the decade. When it was released, audiences expected another seafaring adventure in the vein of The Cruel Sea. Instead, they found a tense allegory for Cold War brinkmanship. Widmark's Captain Finlander, obsessed with hunting the Soviet sub, clashed with Poitier's journalist character, who represented reason amid spiraling madness. The climax, an accidental order triggering nuclear destruction, shocked audiences and left many deeply unsettled. British critics admired its craftsmanship but noted that it was too pessimistic for mainstream tastes. The idea that war could begin not through malice but through obsession and human error was frighteningly plausible. Its lack of catharsis doomed its box office prospects. Behind the scenes, director James B. Harris insisted on stark realism. The shipboard setting was claustrophobic, the tension palpable, and the performances tightly wound. Widmark, usually cast as a villain, thrived in the role of a commander whose authority slid into mania. Today, The Bedford Incident is recognized as a chilling precursor to films like Crimson Tide and The Hunt for Red October. Its overlooked status stems from its refusal to reassure audiences. Instead, it left them with an uncomfortable truth, that one man's obsession could end the world. Forgotten in its day, it now stands as a warning that still echoes in our nuclear age. The Battle of the Villa Fiorita, 1965. At first glance, the Battle of the Villa Fiorita might not seem like a war film at all. Adapted from Rumer Godden's novel, it was marketed as a family drama about children resisting their mother's remarriage in Italy. But beneath the sunlit exteriors and melodramatic marketing, it harbored a war film's soul, exploring the hidden scars left by World War II. Starring Maureen O'Hara and Rossano Brazzi, the film depicted the collision between love, loyalty, and the aftermath of a broken Europe. While most critics dismissed it as a minor romantic drama, what many overlooked was its war-haunted backdrop. Every character carried unspoken memories of a continent recently shattered by conflict. The villa itself became a metaphorical battlefield where innocence clashed with betrayal and love bore the weight of loss. British audiences were puzzled. They wanted spectacle or grit, not a quiet, reflective story about the lingering aftershocks of war. The film flopped commercially, written off as a misfire. O'Hara herself lamented the reception, noting that its subtle themes were lost on viewers expecting another Technicolor romance. Behind the scenes, director Delmer Daves fought to retain the film's melancholy tone, but the studio marketed it as light entertainment. The mismatch doomed its chances. Yet in retrospect, the film's quieter message resonates. That war doesn't just scar the battlefield. It reshapes families, identities, and generations. Today, the Battle of the Villa Fiorita is remembered not as a failure, but as a poignant reminder of how ordinary people grappled with extraordinary aftershocks. It whispers that the war never really ended. It just found new fronts in hearts and homes. The Brigand of Kandahar, 1965. Hammer Films, known primarily for Gothic horror, made a surprising foray into war drama with The Brigand of Kandahar. Directed by John Gilling, the film transported audiences to the Afghan frontier in the 19th century, using colonial conflict as a canvas to explore themes of loyalty, betrayal, and outsider status. When it premiered, critics didn't quite know what to make of it. Some dismissed it as Hammer doing war on a shoestring budget, while others sneered at its exotic setting, claiming it strayed too far from conventional British war cinema. But beneath the surface lay a bold, if flawed, attempt to expand the genre's horizons. Ronald Lewis starred as a disgraced British officer accused of cowardice who joins Afghan rebels, blurring lines of allegiance. The choice to humanize the so-called enemy was daring for its time. But controversy followed. Some accused the film of romanticizing rebellion, while others criticized its casting choices and cultural portrayals. Behind the scenes, Hammer wrestled with budget constraints, reusing sets and costumes from earlier films. Yet the limitations inadvertently heightened the film's claustrophobic atmosphere, forcing the focus onto character rather than spectacle. Though forgotten quickly after release, The Brigand of Kandahar has since been re-examined as an early attempt to question imperial narratives. Its overlooked legacy lies in daring to suggest that war isn't always about clear heroes and villains. It's about fractured loyalties, blurred identities, and moral ambiguity. The Bofors Gun, 1968, Jack Gold's The Bofors Gun was a war film without a war. Yet its tension was every bit as explosive as a battlefield. Set in a single night at a British Army barracks in Germany, the film followed a small group of soldiers assigned to guard a Bofors anti-aircraft gun. What unfolded was less about military action and more about psychological collapse. Starring Nicol Williamson, David Warner, and Ian Holm, the film captured the volatility of men trapped in boredom, resentment, and fear. Williamson's performance as the unstable gunner O'Rourke was electrifying, teetering between menace and despair. Critics admired the acting but found the film too raw, too unglamorous, and too unsettling to succeed commercially. Audiences expecting tanks and battle scenes instead received a chamber piece of human frailty. Its claustrophobic setting, punctuated by bursts of violence and emotional unraveling, shocked those who thought war dramas required heroism. Behind the camera, director Jack Gold leaned into theatrical intensity, using close-ups and confined spaces to amplify tension. The film's stage origins were evident, and some critics accused it of being too talky. But its dialogue revealed something larger: the unspoken traumas and power struggles simmering beneath military life. Today, the Bofors gun is hailed as a hidden gem, a war drama that dared to strip away combat and focus instead on the invisible war inside the human mind. It left behind not images of victory, but of men unraveling under the quiet weight of duty. These 12 films remind us that war's truth is rarely found in triumph, but in the silences, betrayals, and forgotten corners of history. Overlooked in their time, they now resurface with haunting relevance. Which of these British 60s war dramas speaks to you? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe.